So we all know that the UK economy is completely broken. So why aren't politicians talking about that? Why is it they can only talk about immigration? So welcome to Bonkers Economics. This is where we try to talk about the UK economy using images that I've designed which explain why the UK economy is broken. And that's what we've got here. We've got the full set of 12 images. Each one is one reason why the UK economy is broken. So we've got 12 reasons, 12 explanations for why the UK economy is broken. And we're going to go through them one by one in these videos. So first of all, let's just talk a little bit about that problem that we mentioned earlier, that politicians are not talking about this. Well, if you've been paying any attention at all to the party conferences, we've just had the Labour Party conference, Conservative Party conference as well, and others, and basically all they seem to want to talk about, reform as well, they want to talk about immigration. They want to go on and on about immigration. And what they mean by that, of course, is that very, very small percentage of immigration that's illegal or that represents asylum seekers. They're talking about the people who are coming across the Channel, for example. Now, everybody knows, frankly, that fixing that problem, it would be great. It's an important problem to fix, but it's not going to solve our economic problems. It's a tiny percentage of people we're talking about. It's a small part of the UK budget. Ultimately, it's a small number of homes. It's a small number of hotels. It's not, on the scale of things, a massive problem. So fixing it, good as that would be, is not going to fix the UK's economic problems. And the danger is that if we think it is, then we focus on that and we don't focus upon the real issues, and then the problem just keeps coming back and it gets worse and worse and worse. So we need somehow to get our politicians to focus on the real issues, which are economic, which are to do with the way the economy works. And we've had a big campaign on, for example, taxing the rich, taxing wealth. Gary Stevenson, Gary's Economics, he's done an incredible job in raising awareness of this issue, that wealth is poorly distributed across the economy, and we need to do something about that for sure. But that alone is not going to fix things if the underlying problem is with the structure of the economy itself. And what's odd about this is that politicians don't seem to think they can change that structure. And actually, I think that's one reason why they're talking about immigration so much, because they think they can do something about immigration. By talking about it, they've created this huge problem around illegal immigration, which they're now thinking they can solve. And the prize, in their view, will go to whoever can solve that the most effectively. So Reform have got their ideas, which are fairly extreme, and then you've got Labour, which are slightly less extreme, but they're moving in Reform's direction. And then you've got Conservatives, which are also moving more to the extremes. They're all outbidding each other to try to solve that problem, or try to find a solution that we think will solve that problem, because they think they can solve it. And the irony is that they don't think they can solve the economic problems. They don't want to talk about it. They think the economy is cast in stone. The economy is something which they can't change. They can't really fix. All they can do is tweak around the edges. So they don't want to talk about that because they can't really fix it. But the irony, as I say, the irony is that the reverse is the case. Actually, those people coming across the English Channel, they are desperate. They will do anything to cross that stretch of water. And you're not going to stop them by changing the rules. You're not going to stop human destiny by fiddling around with the regulations. You're not going to help the situation by removing ourselves from the European Convention on Human Rights. After all, the clue is in the word human rights. It's a convention that has a purpose. Getting rid of it is not going to get rid of human rights. And people are still going to want to come to the UK because they are desperate to get away from a situation that they're in their own country for all sorts of reasons that we may or may not choose to understand. The point is, that's a problem that ultimately can't be fixed by putting up greater barriers or by pushing more people out or by not letting the boats come. People are going to go on trying to make that crossing because that's what human nature is going to dictate. So governments can't really fix that. But what they can fix is the economy. And they don't seem to understand it. They think the economy is basically owned by the financial market. They think the bond market owns the UK economy, and the British government can't do anything about that. And they're terrified of the bond market, and they're not willing to take the sort of risk of changing the rules in ways that would tame the bond market, that would allow the UK economy to thrive on its own terms. because the economy is a rules-based system. Those bond markets have been created by rules that the governments have created. Government is in charge of the economy in the broadest possible sense, and by handing it over to the markets, it's simply setting a set of rules. It's saying, okay, the rules are the rules of the market. But they don't have to be. The rules can be whatever the rules the government wants them to be. And that's what we need to talk about. What are the rules that are not working? What is the government doing wrong? And what could the government do differently to fix the economy? So here, as I say, we have 12 images here. Each one tells a different story about what's broken in the UK economy. And we're going to focus on one of them today, and that is going to be this one here. So we're starting with this image here because this image is in fact a picture of the UK economy. This image is called "We All Pay for Everything," and what it shows is the UK economy broken down by its constituent parts. And the breakdown is carried out in terms of GDP. Broadly speaking, that's paid work. And each of these sections is a section of the economy as represented by GDP. And GDP is, as we know, it's a combination of three factors. It's the amount of value added to the economy. So you take materials, you do some work on them, you add value, and that's what's represented here. It's also a representation of the amount of money that we spend in each section of the economy. And thirdly, it's a representation of the amount of money that is earned, or at least that is made, or that is extracted in each section of the economy. So it's those three things: it's production, it's earnings, and it's spending. So what we've got here on the extreme left, this is agriculture. It's a very, very thin slice. That's about 0.6% of the total economy. And then moving along, we've got manufacturing. That includes food production, food manufacturing. That's that sort of larger green one there. And then we've got the construction sector here, so that's building things. And then we've got energy sector here, which is includes water, incidentally, water and energy, electricity, oil, all that sort of thing, gas. And then we've got, this is what you might call personal services, things like hotels, restaurants, haircuts, the sort of things where people do things for us, provide services such as meals and things like that. And then we've got the, in yellow, we've got the whole health and education sector. And then moving up, we've got government here. This is the sort of government, the police, the armed forces, and the organisation of government. Doesn't, of course, include all government spending. That's just the actual administration of government. And then here we've got the retail and wholesale and transport section. So that's all about the supply chain, moving things through the supply chain. And then here we've got financial and business services. So this is all that goes on in the City of London. It's all sorts of other things too, accounting, legal services, all sorts of management services, basically activities designed to extract wealth from the economy as far as possible, making rich people richer, we could characterize that. And then here at the end, we've got the rental market, property market. We've got the amount that we pay or pay ourselves by way of rent on our property. So that's quite a big chunk at the end there. So that is what the economy looks like. And what we can see as we go through from sort of traffic light green through to red is that this end of the economy is productive in the real sense. That is to say, here we are making and doing things that produce wealth that we didn't have before. So we're growing things, for example. We're making things. We are making things like meals in that sector. We're generating energy. We are doing things which previously didn't exist, and so they add wealth to the economy in its total. And education and health is a big part of that too, because obviously health is very valuable, education is very valuable, and somebody needs to do the work to create those things. So that's about half the economy. And then the other half of the economy, as we can see, getting towards the red end, is much more extractive. It's not about creating new stuff in the economy, it's about shifting stuff around the economy. And it's about extracting wealth from the economy. It's about making rich people richer, as I say. It's also about finding routes to extract a section of the wealth that's being produced by the truly productive part of the economy. So that's why we've got the whole supply chain here. Now, obviously, you need a supply chain in the economy. You can't do without it. But we don't want it to be so big that it takes over everything else. So, for example, if I'm growing carrots and you're growing potatoes and you live next door and we exchange them over the garden fence, then that's a very, very short, very efficient supply chain. If, on the other hand, farmers' potatoes are being sent 100 miles across the country and then 100 miles back to the nearest supermarket, then that might be profitable for somebody. That might make more money for the supermarket, for example, but it doesn't make more money for the farmer, and it means that the consumer is going to have to pay the cost of all that transport. So the supply chain is not something we want to be as big as possible. Supply chain is something we want to be as short as possible, as efficient as possible. So this section here, getting bigger and bigger, doesn't necessarily make us all richer. And the same is true here of the financial and business services sector. That makes a lot of people very, very wealthy, a lot of people trading like crazy in the City of London, making tons and tons of money, or at least extracting tons and tons of money. But they're not creating anything new. They're shifting wealth from one person to another. So if, for example, you're a lawyer drawing up a contract, that might be useful in many respects, but it still doesn't create anything new. It's a zero-sum game. So if the contract benefits one party over another, then okay, one person is better off and one person is slightly worse off. But at the end of the day, the same amount of wealth exists as existed before. So the lawyer has extracted, if you like, a certain section of that wealth to pay their fees, haven't added to the totality of wealth, they've simply allocated it between the two parties. So again, it's something that may be useful in some respects. Some aspects of this are useful, some are not. Some are purely extractive, purely rich people getting richer, and some do help the wheels of the economy turn. But the same point applies. We don't want too much of it. We don't want an economy which exclusively or very largely is based on extracting wealth that a small number of people are producing. And the same goes for the property market. Rent is purely extractive. Nobody makes land. Nobody creates land. So the large part of the money which goes into rents is simply a transfer of wealth from one person to another because one person owns something and somebody else doesn't. So again, it's a zero-sum game. If I'm paying £1,000 a month rent, then I'm £1,000 worse off every month, and the person who owns the house I live in is £1,000 better off. So the economy as a whole is not winning because we've simply done a straight exchange. And that may be valuable in a sense, but it doesn't add any fundamental wealth to the economy because the house is still the same house. The fact that the rent has gone up, for example, doesn't make that house any different. If the rent could go down to almost nothing, the house would still be there. The value would still be there of the house. The transfer of money from one person to another doesn't make the house inherently more valuable. And yet we're counting it as a big part of the economy. We're saying, hey, this is productive, this is activity, this is something worth having. And so all the way through here, we're counting all this activity as if it's really useful, just as useful as what's going on down here. When in reality it's not. In reality, all it's doing is extracting the wealth that's being produced down here. And this goes to the heart of what is wrong with the UK economy and many other large economies around the world, but particularly in the UK, which is that we've stopped basically doing stuff that's useful. We've got a minute agricultural sector. We produce probably less than half of the food that we need in this country. We've got a shrinking manufacturing sector. We've got a construction sector which is nowhere near as big as it needs to be to provide us with the homes that we all need, for example, and to improve the quality of our infrastructure. For even just to fix potholes in the road, for example, that would be in that section there. And then we've got energy. Well, energy is a funny one because energy, it sounds great. I mean, it's really important that we generate energy, generate electricity, that we produce what we need by way of energy. But water as well, water's in there too. It's also really important. But what those industries have become actually is not so much productive as extractive. So we've all seen how the water industry, for example, is now focused purely on making profits for the water companies, for the privately owned water companies, and has allowed the actual water system to go to rack and ruin. They're simply not investing anything like enough money. They're simply extracting their profits as fast as they can. So even here in the productive section of the economy, we're seeing a large amount of profit extraction. So these areas here are also including a certain amount of extractive activity. But even if they don't, they're still only half the economy. The other half is not adding anything new. And what we need to do is to see a rebalance of this. So we need more of this and less of this. And that means that the money which is being used here, which is being tied up here, needs to come back into this part of the economy. So that's what the image shows. It shows the economy, it shows the imbalance of the economy. It shows the way in which it's shifted from being productive at this end, it shifts to being non-productive, extractive at this end, and how that's effectively meaning we're producing far less wealth in the UK economy than we could if we had much more going on down here and much less going on up here. Now that's something that the government could really give some thought to, and it could really control where money goes in the economy if it wanted to. But it doesn't seem to want to, because it seems to want to rely upon the market. So the way it could fix this, the actual cheap and quick and easy way it could fix this, is to think about the way that it values all this activity. So as I say, this is GDP. And in GDP, in the way the government measures the economy, this activity here is just as valuable as this activity here. But if we said, no, that's not the case, if we said this is not as valuable, this is extractive, not producing anything new and useful, whereas this is valuable and is producing new and useful wealth, then we need to say, okay, when we measure GDP, we need to give more emphasis to this. We need to put more value on this and less value on this. And then we say that GDP is only going to go up if we increase this part of the economy. We can't increase GDP by increasing this part of the economy, as we've tried to do for the last 20 or 30 years. And when we do that, we'll see that the economy produces more wealth. And when the economy produces more wealth, we all get richer. And frankly, it's as simple as that. This is wealth production, this is wealth extraction. And the more the economy is focused on wealth extraction, the less money is available for wealth production. And the money shifts from, broadly speaking, the less well off to the better off. It falls into the hands of the richer, and that's when we get, for example, Gary's economics, we get him saying, hang on, we need to tax the rich, we need to tax wealth, we need to tax all the wealth that's concentrated up here in order to bring some of that activity back down here. Well, he's right, we could do that, but that's not going to fix the problem. The problem is to look at why all the activity is at this end of the economy, and we're not seeing the growth activity at this end of the economy, which is why we need it, and we need to say that that's down to government policy. And the simplest way the government could start to fix that is to revalue the economy so that these activities are given much more prominence in the measurement of GDP, and we stop assuming that people putting up rents on their houses is increasing the size and value of the economy. So that's that image. It's called We All Pay for Everything. We all pay for everything because we're paying for all of this. When we buy anything, think of it as a loaf of bread or barcode or whatever. Think of it how you like. But the point is that each of these stripes we're paying for when we buy something. So if we buy our loaf of bread, we're paying a tiny amount to the agricultural sector and we're paying a huge amount to the financial services sector. And we shouldn't forget that. We're paying for this, and that's why it's called We All Pay for Everything. So that, as I say, is the first image of these 12 in this series of what's wrong with the UK economy, why it's broken and how we can fix it. Next week we'll talk about another one, but for the moment, thanks for watching. If you want to get more information about the image and about the numbers behind it, then you'll find that on the website, which is bonkerseconomics.net. You'll also find plenty of other information about these images, a lot of background material. So please do check that out. Please also do like this video if you've enjoyed it, and please do subscribe if you haven't done already. Please do tell your friends, and I look forward to speaking to you next time.